188, 72. You know, and then I was, you know, I would like to get an excavator at some time, a mini excavator for doing road work. It's just so much faster than a backhoe. You can spin around, you block half the lane. Everybody's got excavators now.
Yeah, I'm hearing that's sort of like the third or nice to have.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, nice to have or not needed is probably not, in this budget season, is probably not gonna.
So the plow truck and then the sidewalk clearing equipment and then the excavator.
Yep.
If you had to rank, so the other one was the culvert, 150, I'm not sure if that's really a capital item. It seems like maintenance, but. Yeah,
I mean, they just asked, put everything on, put everything you want.
I understand that, but if push come to shove, which would
Right.
you put first?
Yeah, we need a truck, I mean.
Well, the culvert wouldn't be CapEx anyways, right?
I don't
Why
know.
not?
Well, it could be,
Yeah, it's a capital expenditure.
In industry, they would do that.
Yeah.
Capitalize it.
Yeah.
It's a one-time.
yeah,
capital
it's certainly gonna
expenditure.
last more than 20 years.
Mm.
I mean, I think you could argue it is a capital item,
Right.
or you could argue it's a maintenance, you know, it could go both ways, so again, I'm trying to understand, so if you added that in, what would be?
To me, it would be a capital if you're gonna, so you're replacing it, not repairing it.
What's that?
The culvert, you're not replacing it, you're not repairing it, you're
No,
replacing it.
We're gonna be putting a new one inside of it. Not taking it apart to put a new one in,
Yeah,
putting it inside.
Well, either way, the first thing you talked about was the
I did that.
was the plow truck, right?
Sure. Yeah, so-
Okay. Do you have anything else that,
So if that was 60,000,
Aspirin?
all right. We'll pass it around.
There you go.
so
What I believe, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, Alan's trying to do preventive maintenance on our road work. The road work is not a capital expense. Capital expenses is equipment. If we were gonna buy a new PA system, that's a capital expense. Road work, those are maintenance issues. The only thing that he has that, again, if you don't have the money, you don't do it. But when the disaster strikes, if it fails, then you go and you present it to the Board of Selectmen, and then you you reach out, the possibilities are you have a quick town meeting and you take it out of stabilization, or you shut the road down forever. I mean, that's why it's important to have your stabilization money up as much as you can to the recommended amount for that kind of situation. We're never gonna get the 8 million that you need.
But that's also a stabilization account.
Yeah.
The capital expenditure, that was also set up as a stabilization account to cover capital projects more than just equipment.
I don't know,
Yeah, I put that in place. I went to the State House and we were the first town in Massachusetts to start a capital expenditure stabilization account.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to suggest is, if you really feel this is pressing, that culvert, it's 60,000 for this next year, I would put in for that, and the capital committee might recommend that out of we want to empty
Right,
if we
no,
don't need it next year, we don't want to empty that fund,
no, I don't want, right,
you know what I'm saying?
yep.
I think if it fits under capital, which seems like it does, you know, at least for the culvert, you know.
I didn't know that you could do that with that, but, yeah.
Well, I think the other piece of all of this is that I've been having discussions with Kim about entirely revamping the way that that we lay out the budget, and, you know, what line items are and where they are, and I think part of that exercise, and this is once we get through the current budget season, and once we get through, you know, the annual meeting in May, to look at all of these things, but go through different departments, and one of them is to find out, like, you have a report on your website that shows, you know, the rating of all the different roads, and I know it's a few years old, but it's a good place to start of, you know, this is the big picture of what we're looking at, a five-year plan, so to speak. And the idea is to plan for all of that in all of the departments, in all of the buildings. We have a new police station. It's brand new, but as soon as it opens, it's gonna start wearing out. And we can't just say, okay, well, we'll think about it 10 years from now. Because Simon and I can tell you a whole story about what happens when you moved into an old building to start new, and it's already worn out when you start.
The mindset of the town has to get away from that, because that's what got us in the predicaments we are
Well,
in
that's what
today.
that's what we're,
We've been, Alan, you know, we've been dealing with it for 30 years.
right, and that's what we're talking about now.
Right.
is to, the first step is to take a hard look at where everything is and exactly what it's gonna cost us, and have a plan. And that way, when you level fund things, you level fund operating, well, if you've already got a plan on the side to maintain everything, then it's not so difficult. But if you're always pulling away to fix crises here and there, you never, you know, you're just, it's always crisis management.
And I think you need something, some kind of plan you can set in stone, because that's exactly what happened with the ambulance. We started every year, the plan was to take $15,000 out of ambulance receipts
Right,
and put it away.
right.
We would have had ample money at this point to buy a new ambulance.
Well-
But then somewhere down the line,
Well, I think part of that, Gene, was that the change in the, you know, the mission of the fire department, and what, you know, whether we had part-time and full-time or call, and, you know, but we're past that now, so we need to, that's what we need to do. So, Alan, thank you.
I just one other question, sorry.
Shoot.
So these line items like B1 through B9, are those accurate buckets, I guess? Because I've heard from other departments,
Well,
They're not
I
really
can,
accurate.
I can answer that. They were accurate at one point, but, you know, there's been mission creep and change in different ways, so
Right.
that's why I just talked about what we're gonna do is completely revamp all of this,
right,
so that some of them are and some of them aren't, and the description's gonna be better, and, some of the things are gonna be lumped together, and there are other things that are used out of these buckets, but they're not described anywhere in the bucket.
No, we don't get a true picture of what was asked for back in 2018. We're looking at what was actually spent, but we don't know what was actually budgeted.
right. So the reason I ask is, I've been on your side, I've had to justify my budget, and when I see budget items last year, all those line items, and this year, the budget is exactly the same.
Right.
And I would be asked, well, what's your actual run rate for this year, and how do you justify that number? Whether it be higher or lower, you know, I mean, when I see the exact same number, that puts up a flag to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I've been on your side, and
Yeah, no, it's fine.
you know,
Yeah, I mean,
it
what's
might be that these aren't actual, you know, these line items aren't what.
Well, I actually brought my, balance sheet from,
Okay.
February 20th, and each one of these items, like, right now, okay, so B8,
Uniforms.
Uniforms, like, yeah, so actuals in 18 were like 6,500, 19, there's 6,800, and then last year's budget is 12,500, then this year it's 12,500.
right.
Because we don't have the actual for this year.
Well, that's what I'm asking, what's the run rate for the actuals?
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I didn't figure that out.
So that, I mean, just, that puts a big red flag up for me,
Yeah,
because it's an unknown, you know? And there could be, and I'm not saying your actual whole budget is level loaded or whatever,
right.
but, you know, it'd be nice to,
Well, some of these things like uniforms, we're in a contract with them, that doesn't go up. So that's that, okay?
but didn't you add a
Pope.
person?
No,
No.
we got rid of one and added
That's what I'm
one.
saying is,
Okay.
we won't know what the
You
actual
know,
spend rate is next year, when we get this. When we go to do next year's budget, this will be by in the actual number. What happened over the years is we took away a couple of line items. What we should be seeing for fiscal year 2018 is what was budgeted and what the actual spent, so that we can look and say,
I see what you're saying.
okay, well, we gave him like these line items now. Let's take that one, 12.5. Maybe he had 12.5 last year, but he didn't
All right.
spend it all.
What I'm,
I've been level funded for,
what I'm gonna ask, again, just to follow what I said a couple of minutes ago, and then we're gonna move on, is, you know, based on the monies that we have right now, you know, to put together this budget is one issue, but once we get through this fiscal year, what we want to do is revamp this whole process so that we can track everything better. But the first step is for you to properly track it. So if these line items don't properly describe it, maybe between you and your administrator down there, you can come up with a new set of line items for your budget.
these are perfect.
Okay, well, there's something that's not perfect about it, right?
What?
Exactly how much is being used and what the run rate is, you don't have a way to track that, right?
Account?
Because,
Well, no, I don't have a run rate, no.
right, So-
That's an accounting measurement that should be done here.
We don't
For the-
have a full
for-
I don't have-
account anymore.
well, we do have
Thing, I've been-
we have a company that we're paying that's supposed to be doing that job.
No,
Yeah.
it should be done here.
Yeah,
Well, it needs, you know what, it needs to be done, you know, and it needs to be done by somebody in the town, and the town is paying to have it done, and if it's not being done, then we need to
Right.
find out where, but
It's a simple procedure. Private industry now, I get a budget for a job, but every week, I get
you
four
know what?
reports every week. He doesn't. You know what I mean? I get a report what activities I put against the monies I spent the week before. I have material costs, separate. It's all a report that you get. This system here is not set up to give him what he spent last week.
I do it basically once a month. This is how I check, keep track of what's going on for me.
he does
actuals
get
this year.
a report on a monthly
Gives me
basis, how much is being
On a
spent.
monthly
Beginning
basis.
balance.
Yes.
Gives me where I'm at now.
Right,
We used to get monthly reports.
Mm-hmm.
We do not get that anymore.
Mm.
Right? When Claudia was here, we used to get a monthly report.
Well, I do my own.
System could spit
I do
that
my
out
own.
any day you want it.
So that I don't run out of
They
money.
want you to go in.
Right, so,
It's in your checkbook.
yeah,
Correct.
right, so that you know
I know
where
where I'm
you
at.
are within $100.
And then I look back at last year, where was I last year?
It's
All right.
just hard for me to,
that,
look at the numbers here and.
Yeah, no,
Just
fine.
I'm not,
No,
it
I
could be
got
that some of that money is excess here, but you're using it for something else, and that's fine. I just would like to have better visibility, that's
Right.
all.
right, but the short answer is you're not sure, right? You don't know what.
Run
you-
rate?
Yeah, right, you don't know what your numbers are. When was,
I know where I'm at now,
Bring us down further.
I just gave it to Norm.
But I think what I think Norm is getting at is, for instance,
you know what, we're already 15 minutes over, we were here to talk about his budget. I hear exactly what you're saying.
Right.
So we need to move on to
Can I help
the
you out?
assessor's
Well,
office.
just to leave this note, again, for what I believe Norm is trying to figure out is, right now, we're 38,000 in the hole, or 18,000, whatever it is that we're in the hole.
Wait a
If we
minute,
know that 1250, just in that account, just to pick that account, that he's only spending 6,000, but he's got 12, well, we could take that 6 out of there.
Exactly.
And now
move it to
deduct it
that
from
with everything
where
else you
we're
probably
shy.
want.
Well-
And maybe you're already doing that, it's
Yeah.
just that I don't have good visibility, that's all.
right.
That makes
And
me
and that information,
All them lines are really close.
the information is available, it's there, he doesn't have it in front of him. Just for clarification, what you're talking about is the way the current budget is for the planning for 2021, we've got about an $18,000 deficit, like, which, and you and I talked about, there's a lot of different ways to make that up.
Yes.
But his budget is not $18,000 in the hole right now.
No,
Right.
but the overall, so when we go like
Of
we used to
the,
do
of
in
the
the
town,
old
the
days,
20,
to go
the
get that
20,
18, it would go back and
This line
say, hey,
item.
it looks like he's got $6,000 extra there. I tell you what, let's take 4 of it, so he's got a $2,000 cushion, because history's telling us he's got a $6,000 cushion there.
Then
Which
you
is
might
what,
have other lines.
I see what you're doing, and that's exactly what we should be
I think
doing.
that's our job,
That
right?
might be balancing some of his other lines, though.
Yeah.
That's what you also have to look at.
True.
He may have an overage. in
Some
one
go
line,
over.
but
Exactly.
it's, you know,
Exactly.
bottom line, it's
Yeah.
balancing some of, like, that happens to us too.
Right, and I'm sure a lot of it, that's what's happening, but I just can't
Right.
see it.
Yeah, right.
That's all.
Right, but also in years past, we made sure that if a line item said road materials, that's what the money was spent for. Because you can sandbag items, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Telephone, you could load up these and then spend it on something else. And in reality, that's a lie to the people that are okaying this budget.
well, none of that has ever been documented going on. There are things that get moved at the end of the year, right? But what we're here to do is talk about is the 2021 budget. And your comment about 18 in the hole, I just want to make sure, because this is being recorded and it's being broadcast.
yeah.
His budget is not $18,000 in the hole right now.
The
We're just
total,
talk-
the total townwide
right,
budget
which
is
in-
18 in the hole, we gotta find 18.
For 2021,
We're
it's
looking
in
for
planning.
opportunities.
Right,
And what we're looking at is opportunities to fill that hole.
okay, thanks, Alan.
Good night.
18,000 in the hole?
It's not bad.
not bad
I
at
don't know
all.
if the estimated receipts have been adjusted yet, but the fire chief has said he feels very comfortable in raising his estimated receipt by 20,000.
Right.
So that gives you plus.
Right, and that's already.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's already,
Is
there's a lot
that
of,
factored in
there's a
there
lot of
already?
things, there's a lot of things that are in flux.
Yes.
And that $18,000 figure doesn't take into account a lot of things. And what
That's
Mike and I,
right.
actually, we talked about already is that, you know, it's the current point of all of the different numbers that are in the budget, but nothing is finalized, even all the estimates aren't finalized yet. So we're actually in a good place,
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
so.
right, so.
Okay, so
Let's talk about the assessors
Okay,
budget.
so assessors is level funded except for contractual increase.
Right.
I don't know what else to tell you. We give you back maybe $2 a year at the end. We spend our whole budget, thank you very much.
And we need it.
We need it, because we don't increase it. Like, for instance, this perfect example, when I first came here many moons ago, there was $1,000 in the mapping line. Then things got tough and they took away some of that money. Down to 400, by the way. Then mapping over the years has gone up, and you graciously did give me some more money, so I'm at $800 now. But my mapping bill is actually $1,150. So, you know, they're, right. So people
We
are
save
very
in this pocket,
reluctant
take
to
back
give
that
any
pocket.
money back on a line item because the next year it might be up again. You know what I'm saying?
So when I look at Department 141, Board of Assessors,
Yes.
for 2021, it says $800 stipends, $81,846 for salaries, $7,625 for expenses.
Yes, and that expenses is everything we have, except
Right.
for
Others-
the cyclical inspection.
Right.
And the revaluation numbers, yes,
Right.
those accounts are special accounts, which
Yeah,
we fund
Roll
every
over from-
year.
right.
Right,
Yeah.
and those will be short, by the way, but we're not going to be requesting any additional funds, even though we know there's going to be a shortage. It's one of these things, I have a 5-year cyclical inspection, so each year he's going to charge us so much, but in the final year, it's a balloon payment. And
if you go to page 11 on your sheets,
while the budgeting, we're hoping to have enough in overlay that we can release that much to be able to pay for the program.
Well, fortunately, we don't have our serial abatement filer anymore.
Well, we
Because-
did very well this year. We
Well,
don't-
the selectmen let us hire a very professional lawyer to tamp that down, and we solved the problem, and he didn't file this year. So we'd have got finally year after year on subdivision. And we were able to come to resolution last
We
year.
mediated it ourselves without having to go to court.
Saved the town a lot of money, but now we're not having that abatement. And if you have those abatement requests, you need overlay to cover the potential of paying that.
But you also need overlay to cover any unpaid taxes.
So let's talk about that. So if we look down to page 11, special articles and other expenses, we have B, cyclical inspection program
Yes,
is at $6,500
each year, yes.
each year, right?
Yep.
So you're saying that's not going to be enough, but then if we look down at other expenses, we have assessors overlay, 120,000,
That's just for FY '21.
right?
And by the way, that 120,000,
Mm-hmm,
that's what we requested,
right?
but I noticed that the senior work-off abatement program was not added to it, which is another 15,000. So I'm not screaming about it right now.
Right. So in
But there
2020, we
should be.
budgeted 140,
Yes.
Right, and that included the senior work-off abatement program.
Right.
so the 120 that's listed is 20,000 short.
50, well, I think
Well,
the program is 15,000.
Well, what
It's not
I'm looking at the one I'm looking at online right
Right.
now.
If you don't have a special line item for for the senior
Yeah.
work-off, it's not funded then in that
Well,
budget.
again, it's not, this is a draft, right?
Right.
So we're in, we're.
But I hadn't mentioned anyone that I noticed that was missing.
Right.
The overlay is not only just for abatements, but the overlay covers all exemptions we give out, the elderly exemptions, veterans exemptions, blind, et cetera.
And it's supposed to cover any unpaid taxes for a given fiscal year.
And
So-
we're always in the red with the DOR. We get a warning, a red flag every year. We do the recap sheet saying that you're not there,
We
you're
don't have
not
enough.
there.
So the number that was listed for the actual in FY 2019 last year was 97.5.
Right, so that's also a place where I make adjustments on the recap sheet. I kind of rob the overlay account for better,
And again, what I said before is we're recording this and we're going to put it out,
Yep.
so everybody can see it. So it's a great opportunity to educate people who want to
Right,
watch.
so
So,
if I'm- if
so
I'm
tell everybody what,
20,000, yeah.
tell everybody what the recap sheet, when you say the recap sheet, why don't you explain what that is?
Okay, so in the fall, it's my responsibility to accumulate all of your budgeted items, and at that point, we know then what our income is gonna be. Right now, it's all guessing. All your estimated receipts are a guess. Your real estate taxes, we don't know how much we're gonna collect at this point.
But we have a
There's the
pretty,
tax
it's
rate.
educated, it's not a complete guess, right?
Right, I mean, it's an
right.
educated guess, but
Right.
it's still, it's a guess. Because we haven't set the tax rate yet, we don't have the new values yet, none of that comes out till fall, and here we are basing a budget on numbers we don't have yet, so we make an educated guess. So in the fall, I have all the numbers, all the true numbers, and I've got to match them. I've got to say, okay, here's what I've got for expenses, here's what I've got for income, and I got to match it. And that sometimes doesn't work so good.
Yeah, It's
So-
a 4-page document that takes into account past overrides and debt exclusions, the estimated receipts, what you're projecting for next year, what actually came in, the values of the town. It all has to harmonize, and the Department of Revenue has to review it. and
Right.
Approve it
So
every year.
if I have a shortage someplace, instead of coming back and saying we need to have a special town meeting or something to make up the shortage, if it's just in the neighborhood of under $20,000, then I do my little, I have to go through and say, okay, where can I find that now and what we've got? And a lot of times it winds up coming out of the overlay account because I can't find it anyplace else. Like, I can only, the Department of Revenue is very, very strict with those receipts.
What is the source of overlay?
It's appropriated
It's
every
your
year.
tax money.
Okay,
But no need for an article or raising and appropriate.
right.
It's an automatic raise and appropriate.
Right, but again, what it
But when it
covers,
says, when it lists assessors overlay of 120,000,
Right.
that's obviously not all the tax money for the whole year.
no,
What
what
is-
what that covers,
That's
again,
raised.
Right, well, how it's, right, what's the significance of the identity of that? In this case, it'd be 120,000.
Why am I asking for 120,000?
Well, I guess that's my point. You ask for a figure that's put into overlay
Correct.
to cover these expenses,
correct.
right?
Generally, exemptions will run somewhere between 70 and 80,000,
Okay.
just for exemptions,
Exemptions, anybody that's granted an abatement.
abatements. And again, we're supposed to have enough in there to pay unpaid taxes, which we never do, but we have, we have a good tax collector who eventually collects most of it, and
I'll give you a good example, though. A lot of times, there's a statewide, especially in the utilities, telecommunications, electric and gas, they'll appeal statewide, and it may not be settled for 5 or 6 years. And we have to be holding a potential amount to give back to them in an abatement without knowing what it is until it's settled. And you get told, if you adopt the statewide settlement, you might owe them $6,000 and they'll waive the interest. And then you do that, or it could be you're
But it-
doing it year after year after year.
this is personal property taxes we're talking. The Department of Revenue sets certain personal property taxes, and that's your big companies such as, well, it sets all your gas pipelines.
It does the
They
Verizon's.
do your big telephone company, your big cable companies and things like that. So we have no say in that.
Yeah,
They
they-
just send me information each year and says, Algonquin Gas, Tennessee Gas, Volume, this
But-
and this, and Verizon,
Yeah, so
and the
you,
other one, AT&T value.
But-
So they came a few years ago and abated. They came through and appealed all of their
well,
values.
another example is we had the developer of a subdivision.
Let me
where we
just,
had 4 years pending.
just once, what I'm just trying to get one
Yep.
thought at a time. So when we look at the budget and it says special articles and other expenses, and one of them is other expenses, assessor's overlay.
Right.
So the assessor's overlay is a portion of money that you as a principal assessor come up with a number.
Yes.
And that number is meant to cover abatements,
Any anticipated abatements, exemptions?
exemptions? Okay. And it's to include that, the abatement we give to senior citizens when they work
It's
a
supposed
certain
to
amount of.
include- Right.
Supposed to include that, and
Right.
you're telling me that right now, the way that this draft budget is $20,000 short.
15.
Well,
15.
on mine it's 20.
Yeah, that
But you're
20
saying
was
it's
added in on top of our
$15,000
number.
short.
The number we submit is what we think we need to cover, which statutorily we need to cover. Then the work-off program is added on top of that.
Okay, but the requested number here is 120. You're telling me you didn't request 120.
I requested 120, just for the assessor's overlay.
Okay.
That does not include the senior work-off abatement program.
Okay. There's another local aid assessments, county tax, air pollution, et cetera, 15,130.
That's all set by the Department of Revenue. That
Okay,
comes
so
off
that
the
has nothing to
cherry
do with that either.
sheet. No,
Okay, so that 120 should really be like 135.
correct.
Okay.
But in a tight budget year, again, like I
Right.
said, I'm not going to stamp my feet. I'll work within what we have. The good news is that within the last few years, overlay used to be designated by fiscal years, and it was stuck in those years. And the Department of Revenue a few years ago decided that it's okay to put it in one account.
That municipal reform act of a couple of years
Allow
ago
us to put it in one
said you
account.
can have it in one
So if you
account.
have a giant abatement in one year, you can draw from those other years now, where before you couldn't. And that's why we don't also offer up any overlay money, because again, we're in the red with the DOR. And it's a good place to
On
have.
paper, because it gets spread out year over year.
Yeah,
It's a good place to have in case of, when I'm doing the recap, I need a few dollars.
Okay. So what you're saying is, even though it's 15,000 short, you know that within that year-to-year process, you can make that up,
we'll make
if you get the number that you have, that this 120.
Fortunately, we have good credibility with the taxpayers here,
Mm-hmm.
and we get very few abatement requests. And those that we do, most of the time, it's just conversation they want, and we're happy to sit them down and explain to them why their taxes are what they are.
What do we have, 2 this year?
And most of the time, 9 out of 10 people walk out without even the application, because they don't understand, that it's just that my taxes are too high. They have to have a basis.
I think we had 3 requests.
We had 4 abatement applications
4
this year,
abatements this year. That's
which I think
extraordinarily low.
statewide was, I think, the lowest in the state.
Yeah, it's, trust me, it's extraordinarily low number.
That was me 7 years ago when I came in. first.
Did I
moved into the-
educate
I
you?
moved into the town 9 years ago, and I came to your office,
Yeah.
and you sat me down, and it was like, this is cool. and I had to agree with you, and I walked away happy, and I
No,
joined the
think-
FinCom.
Right, no one likes to no one likes to pay taxes,
Right,
but I
right,
think as long as you're educated and
Explain,
understand, I think the
exactly.
big thing is they want to make sure they're being treated the same as everyone
Absolutely,
else.
yeah.
And that's
Or
what's
they don't
important.
understand how the process works.
Right,
And I appreciated that, by the way, that was,
thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
You want me to stay here for
You do
a
your
while?
water?
If you would. So Kevin, if you can talk to us about the water board, and I know we create, the townspeople created an enterprise fund last year.
Well, there is a, what we call the public part that the town does pay for. The
Right.
hydrants, the testing of the 4 public water supplies.
It's page 9 for everybody that's,
That we've requested to go up $1,290 on the town side. And that is based on Norman's suggestion from last year regarding the hydrants, of splitting the hydrant share,
right.
so that the town is actually paying its
That's it.
fair share of the hydrants. So we, in our proposal, we put that there. All the rest is within the enterprise fund, meaning the 150 plus or minus users are paying all those costs.
so if you look at the layout, you'll see there's actual numbers for FY 2018 and 2019, and then, starting with FY 2020, they're all dashes, because it's coming out of the enterprise fund.
Right.
But there are still numbers for, for Department
Public water test.
450C, expenses, public water supplies.
Public water tests, public contractor services, public hydrant fees, and public fire hydrant expenses. And that's where we want to go up, after adjusting and going up and down, 1290 increase primarily in the hydrants. And that divides the hydrant costs, literally the way they're used by the public versus the private users.
Right, so we have requested for 2021 right now for hydrant fees, $9,700, which is the same as what's budgeted this year. And you're saying that number is not accurate?
Dan, I went over the numbers with Dan, and what Dan told me that there's an increase and a decrease. I think if you look at contractor services went down by 16%. That he said when it all nets out,
Yeah,
it's
16, well,
percent.
1960
It went down
1960 down.
11,960 to 9,200. I'm sorry, no, I don't have the new number. Oh, I do. It went from 11,960 down to 10.
Right,
But he said when you net everything out of all the public costs,
mm-hmm,
the increase is 1,290.
okay.
And that is just moving the hydrant costs. I think if you look under the line item that it was, I can't remember what the line item is, to tell you the truth, but,
Well, it's showing me here that it's a minus 526 net between
yeah.
hydrant fees and contracted services, I guess.
Well,
Yeah, something is,
all right. And all the rest, though, is contained in the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is on track to be 100% in the black. As you know, as a user, the $12.50 a quarter maintenance fee is worked, and it's building right to the right amount of money. We're able to conduct all the business. We do have one pending issue we're dealing with, and that is under the contract with Hopedale. We are responsible for placing the 2 meter pit meters, and it is time, and the DEP has requested that. And what we're looking at now is the cost differential of trying to rehab the existing ones, which is far less costly. Hopedale wants us to put new ones in. We believe we can rehab the ones that are there versus going new, and we're in the process of determining that. We have to get that all squared away by fiscal '22 is the plan with the DEP.
And is there one pit at the corner of Hartford Ave East and 140?
There's the one in front of it's not at the corner, it's actually in front of the Mutual Mart station. It's in the road right-of-way, in the paved surface, right below the curb near the gas pumps. So if you go right out to the curb, drop down there. The problem we're having right now is, being candid, we need to pull that and have our expert go and see if it can be rebuilt. And since that's Hopedale cops want a minimum 8 hours for a detail. And since it's a state road, what we're doing is asking the state police what they're charged. It's a 15-minute stop. We don't want to pay 8 hours detail pay. So when we work that out, we'll open it up, we'll know if we can rehab that one. And believe it or not, the one on Dudley Road is getting up there in years, and it's time to replace that one.
And that's where the other one is.
The other one is the Dudley Road subdivision, and that, believe it or not, is 20 years old already. The one on Hartford Avenue, on 140 and Hartford Avenue, is older than that, but we think we can rehab it. The cost new is quite substantial for the 2 meters, but again, it's within the enterprise fund, so we have to deal with it within our user base. And that's why we're looking at the most cost-effective. However, if it's not till 2022 and we can rehab both, that capital maintenance fund we put in should cover it by then.
Okay.
The only other issue we have that affects a lot of things in Mendon is Hopedale started strictly enforcing the contract regarding businesses. The contract says any business that goes in what was an existing house at the time the contract was signed is allowed. In the past 2 years, they've allowed the Brazza Garage to be built. They've allowed the Gasco Garage to be built. And they've allowed, although it doesn't use their water, they allowed the car wash to be built. That's on Wells. But it does use water for the bathroom. We had a request to sell the Wenger house next to the soccer field, and Hopedale strictly enforced the rule and said, no, that affects our economic development. If, they tore down the
Skinner's house.
Skinner's house and the old Slavin house, and that's up for commercial growth. Right now, under Hopedale's policy, that would have to be a well. So we're going to go back to Hopedale and ask them if they're willing to modify the contract if the proposed business use would use less water than the residence that was there. In other words, they have a water shortage they're trying to protect. If we can demonstrate it would use less than the house did based on DEP flow rates, would they then allow it? We don't know how they'll respond, but we're going to them this month with that proposal. Otherwise, we're stymied on losing 2 potential developments.
If they say no, is there any recourse?
People have to drill wells.
So there's no appeal to the state?
No, that's the agreement with them, that's the contract.
Now, what about the Wenger house at the corner of Bates Street?
That's what I'm talking about. Kevin Lobuser went into Hopedale with us. He wanted to tear it down and build a nice 2-story brick-faced office building. He demonstrated the water use would be identical or less, and they said, no, the contract says has to be in the house. And I don't know if he still has the option to buy it, but that's dead. I know right now the Slavin and Skinner properties are on the market for $1.2 million, but if somebody wants to go there, right now you got to put a well in. So, part of our contract is also we have to go to all the surrounding towns every year and see if they'll allow us to buy. If we could ever get a deal with Bellingham, that would go away. That issue would go away. We were very close 3 years ago already, and it wasn't presented the way we would have presented it, and the select board shot it down over there.
Now, speaking about those issues, just to notify the rest of the board, Kevin and I and a member of the Economic Development Committee here in town went and met with.
Right, and that's part of, I wanted to bring up today on the task force. We formed last year a task force involving, well, let me tell you who we invited. We invited a finance committee member, economic development member, planning board member, the town administrator, the fire chief, selectmen, and the water commission. I think anybody that had to do with water use. And we have sort of an informal working group that's looking at what do we do to get more water to, first, the two business zones, and primarily the downtown area that lack it, the most cost-effective way. And right now, if we were able to go from another town, you're talking in the tens of millions just for the piping, let alone the acquisition costs or whatever. So the upshot was Mike, his son Tom, who chairs the Economic Development Commission, myself representing the Water Board, met with 2 state economic development officials in, was it January? January, and the recommendation was, in order to get any state grants to help build this, we first needed an engineering study to determine what the best course of action is.
Sounds familiar.
State Rep Brian Murray actually reached out to us last week, and in the proposed state fiscal '21 budget, he has put an earmark for, I believe, it's either 35 or 50,000, he did not get back the final number, to pay for that study, because the working group basically also needs to, it would look at, could we develop a public water supply in the town itself? And the cost of maintaining that versus reaching out, the cost of reaching out to other communities and what that would be, and the method, what's the cheapest, and then the methodology of paying for it, because even if we did get an agreement, with, say, Uxbridge, to come down 16, well, they costed that out 10 years ago, and we were at 7 or 8 million. Today, we figured somewhere around 10. Then who pays for that piping? The normal way of doing it is you charge a betterment fee to people you go by, but you have people say, I've got a well, I don't want to tie in. And I understand from email from Kim to our clerk, Dan Byer, this week, that she now wants a figure for water and sewer. That's a little more complicated, and that will involve us drafting an article, if the warrant is still open, to ask the state to expand the Water Commission's duties to include sewer, because we don't have a sewer board in the town.
And the rest of the story about the discussion was that there's a group that provides interest-free loans to
Yes.
what they call brownfields. And they've
we
been
have a
looking,
brownfield.
they've been looking for places in areas like this, and when they found out that the apple orchard, which is the town-owned land on 16.
I mean, the
you know,
arsenic field,
The arsenic, yeah, has arsenic from the fertilizer.
for
And that-
50 years of
and
arsenic.
And that may fit fit the description, and then also, because some of the towns in the area that are gonna have their sewer plants upgraded because
Well,
they're.
we know one nearby that has capacity,
Right,
sort of down a hill from us.
right, and federally funded, they
There's
have
stu-
to
there's-
offer it. They
There's
can't,
stubs in Uxbridge and Hopedale.
yeah, and they can't
Now,
refuse us.
okay, but just so you know, I had a meeting with the Milford Sewer Board last night, because they have a deal with Hopkinton like that, and I got from them the parameters of what towns can charge each other to do that. Hopedale would have the right to make us pay for our share of the upgrade to the plant, all the infrastructure to them, even in their town, and they could charge us whatever fee they so negotiated,
Yeah.
whatever high rate they want to do, like we're paying their top water rate.
Sure, say that again.
They
But,
could charge
yeah.
whatever fee they wanted to take the sewer per cubic foot, which then would, again, you'd have to say, who's going to pay for all that? If it's a grant, fine, but then you'd be charging that to users.
Jack, you have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, when I was following, and this is a very helpful explanation, thank you. I was following everything up until you were describing the apple orchard here.
When we had, yeah, to answer that question, when we met with, state economic development officials, there's a consortium that, and I'm not exactly sure of the source, whether it's it's a
thought it was state
nonprofit,
agencies.
it's state agencies or nonprofits that actually are looking to spur economic development and offer interest-free loans to municipalities under certain criteria. And when they found out about the circumstances we had right here, and that we had these 2 areas zoned business, and that we had, neighbors, neighboring towns that had water and sewer adjacent, and all we had to do is, I shouldn't say all we had to do, but we had to negotiate and then hook up to it.
Well, I would say sewer, not water.
Right.
now.
Th-
Hopedale's
th-
constrained, Uxbridge is constrained. I mean, just, as part of the contract, we investigated going to a private well in Northbridge.
Yeah, but to finish answering your question,
Yeah.
the point is that something that we've, at least as far as I know, we've never been able to find out before, is there is a possibility, a real possibility of us being able to eventually order, reasonably offer water and sewer two businesses along 16 and 140 in the area zone business. Oh, that's fine.
Because we don't have the source.
Well, the other issue,
Unless we
but the
develop-
other issue I've been told, even for those places that had to have a well,
Yeah,
the recharge loop, so to speak, for those, there's been water in those areas piped in since 1950. And the only way that the water goes away is it goes into the ground.
correct.
So if somebody puts a well in that ground, in other words, they would be able to get water
Yeah, well, for
from a
instance,
private
on
well.
16 right now, the existing, when you go from the old gas station where the leak was, back down to Hopedale, when we had the pipe put in 20 years ago, the residences are tied into Hopedale. And
Right.
being Hopedale, the businesses have no connection.
Right, because of the agreement from the contamination.
So, Mr. Chair, Kevin, so the status of that property as a brownfield is actually potentially beneficial in terms of
To get a grant.
a grant
Right.
to.
Should the town want to,
Right, the other problem, and of course, on the flip side, anyone who wanted to purchase it, it's a brownfield.
Got it, thank you.
but for instance,
Thanks, Ed.
it's extraordinarily hard, being candid, I mean, to attract business when you're off the main highway. I mean, 16 is a lot of traffic. We're not on 495 or 146. So to attract business without water and sewer, they're not even looking at it. I mean, if you remember, the Cumberland Farms that was redone in Hopedale tried to come up here, and they needed a town meeting to get an extension to put their well on the town piece of land, not the corner lot is still privately owned, to come on the town, and the townspeople voted against it. I mean, they moved to renovate, they spent close to $6-7 million tearing down buildings and building that new facility. That could have been here. And, without water or sewer. But I mean, I'll give you a better example is to think of the corner of Hartford Avenue 140, where the old big white house that was Dick Skinner's was bought and torn down. The next house going down Hartford Avenue is torn down. That property is being offered for the market at $1.2 million. And they have a bank, they have a scheme of a bank going on and something. To attract something like that without water and sewer, it's going to be hard. It's really going to be hard. But if you had that ability, or just say you wanted to get something going up right here on the corner, if you had the ability to get water and sewer, you could then, even with the brownfield, you could then offer it to somebody, and they know there's water and sewer, and maybe there's remediation for the brownfield through another state agency, or they could ask for a tax reduction, or they could do that. But you're better off being able to attract business. And you have substantial parcels that could be developed. I mean, in the long run, I mean, I hate to say it, but, I'm a resident on 140. 30 years from now, I expect that the string of residences, there's 3 residences near me. 30 years from now, I fully expect those to be gone and a business there, because that's our business zone. And the economics are getting in this area to the point that,
Favorable for that.
well, I've already had inquiries on mine, but I don't have the frontage they want. So,
That's true, that's true, Kevin, but in order to plan it properly, a lot of
Yes.
things gotta be taken into consideration.
correct.
To
So,
put an investment for having a sewer, you gotta look at the payback for what, 3 lots? The cost for service 3 lots? That's why it's taken so long to develop it. Now, are you gonna develop, again, 30 years from now, is that gonna be like Route 9? If it is,
No.
it's gonna look like Route 9 because you can't overwhelm the area like they did down at the 495 Exchange.
well,
down
candidly, our
here,
zoning
you
doesn't
can't
allow it
move.
today.
So,
Our zoning doesn't allow it today.
right, but zoning can be changed.
But at the very least, let me just go back to the example, though. If Hopedale's not letting us continue water service to the 2 areas that we know right now people would like to put business, that's hurting our economic development and tax base in the long run. So that's a short-term problem we're trying to solve. Whether or not we get an earmark on the engineering thing, the task force is going to look at ways to figure out what is it going to cost us in the long run. And we may come back here a year from now at the one annual town meeting. And if we haven't got a state grant, say we need $20,000 or $30,000, or would like to get $20,000 or $30,000 to do a feasibility study of building our own water supply. Because in the long run, believe it or not, it'd be cheaper for us if we had
Our own.
a good land area in that. Believe it or not, it would be cheap enough. And what I found is there are actually companies who would build the whole thing in return for a long-term contract to run it. They'd drill the wells, they'd put the treatment plant in and all that, because, you know, you need special clear zones around them, you need treatment operators around the clock. The federal standards, the state standards are unbelievable. But we need help to look at that and evaluate it. And I'll tell you, a bunch of part-time people, you know, looking at this part-time.
Don't have the ability or the capacity to do it.
No, I mean, the Tate and Howard study for Uxbridge that's now 8 or 9 years old, costed it out pretty well, but didn't look at then how do you pay for it. They just looked at the cost and the feasibility. And since then, we know Uxbridge doesn't have the water. So, and if I remember, when the restaurant owners and other people on 16 saw the dollar figure on that, they sort of said, that's nice, bye-bye. And as you and I have discussed, and we discussed at the meetings, what good does it do a restaurant to get water if they got no place to put it? So then sewer comes into the
If
picture.
it comes in, it's gonna be able to go out.
And we're not having a full board meeting till next week, but with Kim's request made through Dan, I already made a phone call to the state and found out we need enabling legislation to go through town meeting to the legislature then to say, to give somebody, and since we exist, make us the water and sewer board and have us explore it. Other than that, you'd have to go to the legislature and create a new board. And I don't even know how the selectmen or Kim feel about that, but, you know, if you want us to move ahead, I don't know if the warrant's still open, but we gotta come up with something.
Tomorrow's the last day.
Well, then I'll file something tonight, we can amend it later,
Okay,
and discuss it with the board later, but that, you know, we wanna keep it moving ahead.
I agree.
But in terms of dollars, the enterprise fund is achieving its goal of staying within things. And unless we have a major catastrophe, our goal is not to go to the non-system people, that is, the great majority people. For those with long memories, remember, I used to stand up at the town meeting whenever the water board wanted something and said, why am I paying for it? Well, the enterprise fund now prevents that.
Right.
So that, with the exception of Mike, the rest of you guys aren't paying for something that we have.
And he is too.
You're on it, okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Appreciate
So
it.
I don't know if, you know,
Thank you.
we have a pretty good handle on where we're going. You know, I just throw another plug. I know you can't do a darn thing with the salary. You know, for a supposed 5 hours a week, Dan Byer gives us more like 20. And honest to God, if we ever got to the point of having a water system, I'd make him, I'd hire him to run it,
Yeah.
because unlike other departments, we can tell you days after the bills go out where we stand on everything.
Yeah. He wears a lot of hats, and some of his salary does come under the selectmen too, and they're aware of,
Yeah, and I know
What he does.
there's movement around to change where
Yeah.
it comes out of, but,
yep.
so thank you. And,
All right,
you
you're
know,
welcome.
Hopefully, we get shorter and shorter every year because we got the enterprise fit.
Right.
Oh, and
Less and less to talk about.
I just want to remind you, and I know Dan sent it to everybody, I don't know if you have it. We do have the, I don't know if this is the final version. We do have the report that has to go into the FinCom book, because it does outline the budget for the year and where it's going.
Can you email that to Jean?
Yeah.
Great.
I'll have Dan do it. Dan,
Yeah.
well, I have this copy, but Dan told me we have to vote on the wording in the bottom of it tomorrow.
Okay, well, once it's done, if it's gonna go in the FinCom book, just please send it to Jean Davern, so she can capture it and put it in there with the rest of it.
We're voting on whatever next Thursday night is. You'll have it that night. I'll send it that night.
Thanks.
Do all the homes now have new water meters?
We are about 85% done, and what the problem that happened is when we broke off with Hopedale, they actually had they had subcontracted it out illegally when they were our maintenance people. And since then, we've had trouble getting the resources to put them in, and they've gone in onesies, twosies, but we have to be careful because the person putting them in has to A, know how to do it, and B, be insured by the town. So far, we've had people doing it on a part-time basis, and Dan just located a person who we think will do the rest within the budget funds remaining. I'd also talk though, we've replaced all the major industrial ones at their expense. They've all been renewed. And the new meters, by the way, let us track you, we can track you minute by minute use. When people question a bill and say, I never used that, we can print out a chart like this and say, oh yeah, you did.
Dan sent me an email saying my water was, I had a leak or something.
Yeah.
I had a toilet, just a small,
He actually does that every billing cycle. He'll look for outliers, and he will contact the people and say, you have abnormal water use, you better have a plumber check. I mean, and he's like Mass Electric now. We drive around with the wand.
Right.
And by the way, we also bought all our own set of tools to cut down an outside contractor. Dan and then I, on weekends, we do valve checks and replacements ourselves,
Great.
instead of paying a contractor. I know we're,
Right.
so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so just to reiterate, we will not have a meeting next week. The following week, we should have the rest of the elected boards, and then on the 25th of March, we have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen to discuss the remainders of the budget with them. So, 8:25, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thanks.